Hello everybody, my name is Troublmaker, and today I would like to talk about artillery. So artillery has two purposes. The first is to deal with area of effect damage. In late game, there's a lot of units and they're often very concentrated, and so artillery is brought in to bring splash damage to evenly hit all these targets with small to medium damage, depending on which artillery type you use. The second use of artillery is morale damage. Morale is this little stat you've probably noticed on units that informs you of how much or how little they are keeping their cool. Once a unit completely panics, they will rout, or in other words, they will retreat, and they'll do so in a very random direction. The advantage of this is that there's a chance he will retreat towards your forward line and get picked off. This can happen to all units, so it becomes very advantageous when you can pick off some really expensive units. There are basically three subtypes of artillery in Wargame AirLand Battle. The first is your standard artillery. As characteristics, it has long range, medium cost effectiveness, and a medium-sized area of effect spray. This is most often used for killing infantry. The second subtype is mortar type. Now, of course, not all of them are actually mortars, but they are characterized by having short range, high cost effectiveness, and small size spray. This vehicle is most commonly used for morale damage. The third type of artillery subtype is the rocket-based kind. These are often short-ranged, very low cost effectiveness, and have a very large spray. These units are primarily used at endgame for killing units. So when you're looking at your mortar and standard units, these can be picked up early game. Because of their high cost effectiveness, the mortar will be used for flushing out enemies through morale damage or making them fall apart through an attack. The standard artillery will be for killing infantry and killing vehicles. Less about morale damage, more about killing stuff. Your rocket types, however, are only cost effective later in the game, just because it costs a lot to fire them. Just as an example, let's look at the Buratino and its cost. Hi, my name is Troublmaker and I'm on site to answer the simple question, how much supply does a Buratino use? I've created a deck which has the UROL 4320. Each one of these has 1250 supply. We'll also be using one Buratino. So, how much supply does a Buratino use? Well, first things first, let's empty our Buratino, shall we? Okay, our Buratino is empty. Let's see how much supply one Buratino will use. So as you can see, one Buratino volley is about one truck's worth. 1250 supply per volley. So when you're using your artillery, you have your mortar and your standard types, and you'll want them firing far more often. It'll be less targeted. You'll be hitting random spots where you would put units if you were the enemy, and it's less about vision. You don't really need to know where the enemy is for these. Because they don't really drive so much supply, you can have them almost firing constantly throughout a 20 to 25 minute match. And that's perfectly fine. That's considered alright within standard tactical play. However, they cannot be aimed against tanks and should not be aimed against tanks. The big reason for this is veterancy. Veterancy can be earned by being attacked. And so if you're hitting tanks with these very weak units, the tanks won't take damage. However, they will gain veterancy. That means at the end game, these tanks will be harder to kill and they'll be doing far more damage themselves. Mortars and artillery should only be used when some sort of rocket or missile based weapon is available to destroy a routing unit. So this can involve tanks and vehicles and RPG based infantries, anything with a long range that can hit the enemy. Rocket based artillery does insanely high amounts of damage. However, if the number of units in the area is too small, you lose a lot of supply cost. To this extent, you should only ever use rocket-based artillery in the very, very late game. As a rule, if you are winning, you should spend the last 5 minutes of the game doing nothing but non-stop artillery barrages on select areas. This will weaken the enemy units, this will cause them to have morale damage, and this will make them less prepared to launch a final attack. However, if you are losing, you should try and prepare for an attack with artillery supporting for extra morale damage. So one last tip before I send you home. We have 2 BM-21 Grads here. We're going to fire one with an uncorrected shot. We're going to fire the other one with a corrected shot. So what I want you to notice right off the bat is that one has a higher range of damage that it's dealing. The other one is far more concentrated. If you always attack with corrected shots with your rocket-based weapons, you have a higher chance of destroying tanks. If you don't, you have a higher chance of hitting infantry and vehicles. You should always have a recon with this artillery type, and you should always know exactly what you're hitting just because the cost is so high.